Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a topic that's fundamental to pretty much every interaction we have: understanding people.
That's right.
We're pulling insights from our source material, specifically notes and summaries from Read People Like a Book by Patrick King.
Yeah, we've got a good stack here. And our mission in this deep dive, it's really to cut through the noise, extract the most powerful nuggets from this material, and hopefully give you practical ways to look beyond the surface to really grasp what makes people tick.
If you've ever felt a bit lost trying to figure out why someone said or did something, maybe wished you could feel more confident reading a room.
Well, this deep dive is for you.
Definitely.
We're aiming to give you a kind of shortcut to becoming more perceptive, maybe more comfortable, and probably less bewildered by human behavior.
We'll be your guides through the key ideas presented in the book, connecting those underlying psychological drives with the behaviors you can actually observe.
The things you see and hear.
Exactly, both in words and in actions, yeah. Okay, let's unpack this then, starting with the absolute foundation. Why do people do anything? So the book kicks off by tackling that core question. What actually drives us?
Right. It argues that every single action, whether we really think about it consciously or not, is motivated by something.
There's always a reason.
Always a reason. It's like everything has an engine, even if you can't see it running. The source highlights fundamental drivers like desire and fear.
The big ones.
Yeah, and it boils it down really nicely to the pleasure principle. We're essentially wired to seek pleasure and maybe even more strongly to avoid pain.
Understanding that basic push and pull seems crucial.
It really is. And it brings in some heavy-hitting psychological concepts, too, to explain those deeper, sometimes kind of hidden motivations.
Like Carl Jung's idea of the shadow. What's that about?
The shadow. You can think of it as the part of yourself you'd maybe rather not look at.
Okay.
The traits, desires, or weaknesses you might push down or just ignore. But the book points out, just because you ignore them doesn't mean they aren't influencing you.
Or influencing the people you're trying to understand.
Precisely. And the inner child concept is mentioned too.
Right, how experiences from way back when can still pop up.
Exactly. How things from childhood can still shape adult reactions and behaviors, sometimes in really surprising ways.
So recognizing these, less conscious forces, the shadow, the inner child stuff, helps you see people with more nuance.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
For instance, books suggest someone's, say, grandiosity, or their constant need for validation. That might actually be a defense mechanism.
Covering something up.
Covering something up, maybe stemming from an insecurity they hide, part of their shadow, or inner child issues perhaps. Seeing it that way isn't just judging them.
It's understanding.
It helps you understand why they're behaving that way. And that allows you to respond differently, maybe with more compassion instead of just getting annoyed.
That makes sense. The book also brings in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a great framework.
Maslow's pyramid. Yeah, it's super helpful. Understanding where someone might be focused on that hierarchy. Are they worried about basic survival, like having a roof over their head, safety needs?
Or are they looking for connection, belonging?
Right. Or maybe striving for achievement and recognition that's esteem. Or even reaching for their full potential self-actualization way up top.
Knowing that level gives you a clue about their priorities, right?
A huge clue.
Yeah.
About their current priorities and why they might be acting the way they are. Someone focused on safety is going to behave very differently from someone pursuing self-actualization.
And then there are those little mental tricks we all play on ourselves, the defense mechanisms, like denial.
Oh, yeah. Denial, rationalization, projection, the classics. These are fascinating because they're the ways we kind of distort reality, usually unconsciously, to protect our ego from uncomfortable truths or feelings.
So observing them tells you something.
It tells you a lot. Observing when someone's using denial, nope, that's definitely not happening.
Yeah.
Or rationalization, well, I only failed because the test was unfair.
Yeah.
Or projection, he's the one who's angry, not me. It gives you insight into their underlying fears, insecurities, or maybe things they just can't admit about themselves.
What I find powerful about this first section is how it gives you these different lenses to look through.
Exactly.
Pleasure, pain, shadow, inner child, Maslow, defense mechanisms. It helps you start thinking about the why before you even get to the observable stuff.
Precisely. The book really emphasizes that grasping these motivations provides a framework. It gives the example of, say, a colleague who's super stressed about a deadline.
Okay.
It's not just, oh, they're anxious. It could be rooted in a really deep fear of failure from something that happened years ago, like inner child stuff or shadow stuff.
And knowing that changes how you interact.
It lets you approach them with more empathy, maybe offer support differently. You can actually, change the dynamic to get a better outcome. It shifts your perspective from just judging to actually understanding.
Okay, so that covers the hidden why, the motivations driving things. But how do those motivations actually show themselves?
Right. How do we see them?
That's where the book dives deep into what we can actually observe.
Yeah.
The nonverbal signals.
Yeah, and the core message here is, well, it's simple, but pretty profound. While words can be chosen carefully, maybe even used to deceive,
The body tells a different story.
the body often tells a different story. Our nonverbal communication is more, let's say, primitive, more instinctual. The idea is the body doesn't lie in quite the same way words can.
And the source material really highlights some key figures here. Paul Ekman's work on microexpressions comes up.
Microexpressions, yeah, they're incredible. Those really fleeting facial expressions that flash across someone's face in just a fraction of a second.
Down before you know it.
Almost. But they reveal their true emotion before they have time to mask it. Happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, disgust. Ekman showed these are basically universal, wired into us regardless of culture.
So learning to spot them is like getting a little peek behind the curtain.
A tiny, honest peek into someone's internal state, exactly.
And it's not just the face, is it? Body language in general is huge. The book mentions Joe Navarro, the ex-FBI agent.
Yeah, Navarro's work, especially on things like pacifying behaviors or defensive postures, is really key.
What are pacifying behaviors?
Think about when someone's stressed or uncomfortable. They might touch their face or neck, fidget with jewelry, kind of self-soothe in small ways. Those are pacifying behaviors.
Okay.
Or if they feel threatened or vulnerable, they might cross their arms or turn away slightly. Those are more defensive postures.
But these aren't just random movements.
No, the idea is they're rapid-fire signals about their internal feelings.
Yeah.
And this is a really important caution the book makes.
You can't just pick out one gesture and run with it, right?
Absolutely crucial point. A single crossed arm could just mean someone's cold, not necessarily defensive or closed off.
Context.
Context is everything. The real skill isn't spotting one isolated cue. It's seeing clusters of behaviors, patterns that repeat or happen together. That gives you a much more reliable picture.
So are they crossing their arms while leaning away and giving short, clipped answers?
Exactly. That whole cluster tells you a lot more than just the crossed arms alone. It's about reading the entire pattern, the whole picture.
So you're observing the face, the body, listening to the voice, the tone, the pace, putting it all together.
Mm-hmm. And the source suggests practical steps, like figuring out someone's baseline.
They're normal.
Yeah, how do they usually behave when they're relaxed or just neutral? Once you know that, then you can spot deviations more easily.
And look for mismatches, like words saying one thing, body saying another.
Yes, look for incongruence. That mismatch is often a big signal something's up. And in groups, pay attention to the energy dynamics. Mm-hmm. Who's leaning in, who's holding back.
It all feeds into it.
It all feeds into a more comprehensive reading. The big takeaway here is nonverbals are powerful, definitely. But they need careful interpretation, holistically, in context, looking for patterns, and always being mindful of your own biases, potentially coloring what you think you see.
Okay, moving beyond those immediate signals, those momentary emotions, people also have these persistent ways of being, right? Their personality.
Yeah, the enduring patterns.
The book digs into how understanding personality gives us like a broader context for what we observe moment to moment.
Right. If motivations are the engine and nonverbals are the dashboard lights, personality is maybe the overall design of the car, the model, the make.
I like that analogy.
It gives you the long-term framework. Right. And the source introduces some of the major personality frameworks that psychologists use.
Like the big 5 traits, those seem pretty widely accepted.
Very widely accepted. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Often remembered by the acronym OCEAN or CANOE.
And these are spectrums, right? Not just boxes.
Exactly, spectrums. Is someone generally adventurous and open to new ideas? High openness. Or more traditional and prefers routine? Low openness. Are they organized, reliable, detail-oriented? High conscientiousness. Or more spontaneous, maybe a bit disorganized? Low conscientiousness.
Sociable and energetic, extroversion, versus quiet and reserved.
Introversion.
Yeah.
Kind and cooperative, high agreeableness versus more challenging, maybe skeptical, low agreeableness, and emotionally stable, calm under pressure, low neuroticism, or more prone to worry, anxiety, mood swings, high neuroticism.
Just knowing roughly where someone falls on those gives you a lens, doesn't it?
A powerful lens for predicting their general approach to life, to work, to relationships.
The book also mentions other frameworks like the MBTI, Myers-Briggs.
Yep, the MBTI is mentioned categorizing people into 16 types based on preferences like introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, judging, perceiving.
And the Enneagram, too.
And the Enneagram, which is particularly interesting because, unlike some others that focus mainly on how you behave, the Enneagram really emphasizes the underlying core fears and motivations driving each type.
Which connects back beautifully to what we talked about first.
It really does. It loops back to those fundamental drivers.
Okay, so these frameworks sound incredibly useful, but the book gives a pretty necessary warning about them, doesn't it?
A crucial warning, yes.
Yeah.
These are models. They're useful tools for thinking about human variation and complexity. But they are not rigid boxes to trap people in.
People are more complicated than a label.
So much more complicated.
Yeah.
Nobody is purely one thing. People absolutely change over time. Life experiences shape us profoundly. Using these frameworks should add nuance to your understanding, not create simplistic labels that actually limit your perception of someone. You have to remain flexible.
That's a really important point. So this raises the question, how do you actually use this understanding of someone's personality profile in a practical way, day to day?
Well, the source suggests it's primarily about tailoring your approach for communication, for interaction.
So,
Like if you know someone tends to be, say, low on agreeableness, you can anticipate they might question things more, maybe be less inclined to just immediately go along with a suggestion.
so you prepare differently.
You prepare differently. You can frame your communication to address potential disagreements up front, perhaps focusing more on logic and data if they lean towards thinking in the MBTI sense, or maybe connecting to shared values if they lean towards feeling.
No, it helps you anticipate potential reactions.
Exactly. Anticipate reactions and communicate more effectively by respecting their natural inclinations while still, staying adaptable yourself.
Ooh, okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about one of the big reasons, maybe, that many people want to learn to read others. Spotting deception. How do you tell if someone's lying?
The million-dollar question. The book tackles lie detection head on.
And what's the verdict?
Well, its first point is probably the most important, and maybe the most counterintuitive for a lot of people. Most of us are actually pretty terrible at detecting lies.
Really? Even if we think we're good.
Especially if we think we're good. Research consistently shows that even people who think they have a knack for it, or even, trained professionals in some fields, often perform a little better than just flipping a coin. Like
Wow.
50-50 accuracy.
Wow. So that popular image of just looking for someone fidgeting or avoiding eye contact, that's not reliable.
Not reliable on its own, no. Those are often just signs of nervousness or anxiety.
Wow.
And guess what? Someone telling the truth might also be nervous.
Good point.
So those cues can be really misleading. The book emphasizes the sheer uncertainty involved here. There are no guaranteed tells, no Pinocchio's nose.
But can accuracy improve sometimes?
It can improve under very specific conditions, like if you have a really solid baseline understanding of how that particular person behaves normally, or if the lie is maybe spontaneous, not rehearsed, and the stakes are high for the liar. But even then, it's still incredibly tricky.
Okay, so if just passively watching for cues isn't the best answer, what does the book suggest is a more effective approach?
It shifts the focus away from just passive observation and towards active engagement. Meaning the most effective way to potentially spot deception, according to the source, is through strategic conversation.
Asking questions.
Asking good questions. Getting the person to talk more. Using open-ended questions that require detailed answers. Maybe introducing elements of surprise or unexpected turns in the conversation. These can be much more revealing than just looking for a twitchy eye.
Why does that work better? What's the theory?
It ties into something called cognitive load. Basically, telling the truth is usually easier for the brain. You're just recalling facts, accessing memory,
Okay.
fabricating a story, especially on the spot, and keeping all the details consistent, making it sound plausible, that requires significantly more mental effort. It increases the cognitive load.
So strategic questioning makes their brain work harder.
Exactly. It increases that cognitive load even further.
Yeah.
This can make it harder for someone lying to maintain their facade, potentially leading to inconsistencies, contradictions, unusual hesitation, or maybe verbal slips they didn't intend.
So you're listening intensely for those inconsistencies, for shifts in their story.
Yes.
Looking for emotional expressions that maybe don't quite match what they're saying. And a really critical piece, the book says, is being aware of your own biases.
Oh, absolutely critical. Do you want to believe this person, or do you already suspect them? Do you generally trust people, or are you naturally skeptical?
Your own mindset matters.
Hugely. Your own pre-existing beliefs about someone's honesty or lack thereof can heavily influence what you notice, or how you interpret the cues you do see. The book really stresses that managing your own biases is key to improving your chances, while always remembering that lie detection is about working with probabilities and potential signals, not about achieving absolute certainty. It requires critical thinking, not just gut feeling.
All right, finally, the book kind of brings it all together, wrapping up by focusing on everyday life and just refining our general powers of observation. It mentions the concept of thin slicing.
Thin slicing, yeah, that's fascinating stuff. It's basically our brain's ability to make surprisingly accurate judgments about a person or a situation based on really brief snippets of information.
Like first impressions.
Exactly like first impressions, sometimes formed within seconds of meeting someone. It's that initial gut feeling or intuition. And the book notes that research actually suggests these snap judgments can sometimes be more accurate, at least initially, than when we consciously overthink things too much.
Interesting. But you can get better than just relying on the snap judgment by being more consciously observant.
Absolutely. You refine it through conscious observation. What should you be looking for in just everyday interactions? Well, basically everything.
Go on.
Beyond the body language and the microexpressions we talked about, pay close attention to verbal cues, the specific words someone chooses to use, their language patterns.
What can words tell you?
A lot. Do they use I constantly, suggesting self-focus? Or more we, more team-oriented or relationship-focused? Are they using extreme black and white language? Or more nuanced phrasing? Their vocabulary, their sentence structure, their tone can reveal their mood, aspects of their personality, what they value, maybe even their level of emotional stability.
And it's not just the person themselves in isolation, is it? The book says you can read a lot from their environment, their possessions, like a detective at a crime scene.
Oh yeah, it's exactly like that. Like Sherlock Holmes reading a room, someone's physical appearance, their clothing choices, they're grooming these send signals, conscious or not, about their personality, their values, maybe their self-esteem.
And their home.
Their living space. The source highlights that someone's home is often a real extension of who they are. It reflects their values, their priorities, their life experiences, maybe even their aspirations, all through their decor, how organized or disorganized it is, the specific items they choose to display.
Even online stuff, social media.
Even online behavior, yeah. On social media, for instance, posting patterns, the types of photos shared, how they interact these, can offer clues about traits like extroversion or maybe conscientiousness.
And observation doesn't have to be just passive watching. The book talks about using questions strategically again, but maybe in a different way than for lie detection.
Right, using questions not to catch someone out, but just to uncover insights gently.
What kind of questions work well for that?
Indirect or hypothetical questions are often great. Instead of asking directly, like, so what are your core values? Which can feel a bit confrontational or put people on the spot.
Yeah, a bit much.
A bit much.
Yeah.
You might ask something like, if you could support any charitable cause, which one would it be and why? That indirectly gets at their values.
Or asking what they'd rescue from a fire?
Yeah, shows priorities. Or maybe asking, what traits do you admire most in characters in movies or books? That can reflect their own aspirations or what they feel is important, or maybe even what they feel they lack themselves.
These questions invite conversation.
Exactly. They invite dialogue and often get people to reveal aspects of their inner world, maybe without even fully realizing it.
So putting this all together, it sounds like it's about constantly layering these different levels of understanding.
That's the idea.
You've got the hidden motivations, the visible nonverbals, the underlying personality patterns, and then this conscious observation of behavior, words, environment, building a richer, more complete picture over time.
Precisely. It's an ongoing process, not a one-time judgment. It's about refining those initial thin-sliced impressions with more deliberate analysis, considering all the available information, always factoring in the context. The ultimate goal isn't just to label people, but to understand them better, whether it's in a work meeting, a casual chat, or, anywhere you interact with other humans.
Well, this deep dive into the source material from Read People Like a Book really does give us a comprehensive toolkit, doesn't it, for trying to understand people better. It breaks down what feels like a really complex skill into these distinct kind of actionable areas.
It does. From recognizing those deep-seated motivations that drive behavior, to decoding the often more honest signals of body language and microexpressions, then understanding those longer-term personality patterns, and finally, applying focused observation and strategic questioning in everyday life.
Yeah.
The book provides these practical frameworks, but crucially, it constantly reminds us to consider the context, to appreciate complexity, and to be really aware of our own potential biases and limitations, especially when it comes to something as notoriously tricky as lie detection.
Absolutely. So if this conversation has sparked your curiosity and you want to explore all the examples and the nuances that Patrick King shares in much more detail, you can definitely grab a copy of Read People Like a Book.
Good idea.
We'll make sure there's a link for you right though in the description.
And of course, if you found this deep dive helpful, if you like getting these kinds of shortcuts to being better informed, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our future deep dives.
Okay, before we wrap up, time for that final provocative thought.
Right. So we spent this whole time exploring how to read other people, right? By looking at their motivations, their cues, their patterns. But the source material also subtly touches on self-awareness. Given how much of our own stuff, our biases, our fears, our shadow selves, as Jung would call it, can influence how we perceive others. Here's the thought. What does the act of trying to read someone else actually reveal about you?